Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. I'm Beatriz Mourad, and today I'm joined by Alex Bonilla.
Hola.
And Ryan Van Voorhis.
Hello.
Today we are finally discussing Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. Before we get started, I just want to let listeners know that yes, we will be getting into spoilers, but we will be having a brief non-spoiler discussion to start us off. Find out more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can subscribe to us on iTunes at overlyanimated.com/iTunes, where we appreciate your star ratings, or search for Overly Animated on your favorite podcatcher. So, let's just dive right in with the easiest question without any spoilers. Try to be brief, but it's okay if you're not. Did you guys like this movie? Alex, let's start with you.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give some brief context first. I have not watched a single Wes Anderson movie before this, so I'm going in completely clean. I know that I've heard that his style of humor and filmmaking is pretty static across his films, but I have not much exposure to that. So with that said, I enjoyed this. It was entertaining from beginning to end. I think that the tone of it stays mostly in at a constant pace as well, like trying to balance quick brushes of humor, trying to add some emotional depth. I think the main character in this movie goes through an arc that's believable enough. And the atmosphere is just very interesting to watch. Like, the music is incredible at times. The animation itself, there are like moments that really stand out. So while I'm not going to call it the best animated movie I've seen in a long time, but it definitely is above average compared to other films that we've covered on this podcast in the past.
I mean, but that's not hard. That's a very low bar.
Yeah. But I definitely would say that I enjoyed it, in my opinion.
Cool. Ryan, did you like this movie?
As someone who has watched Wes Anderson's previous movies, I went into this movie kind of knowing what to expect, and Wes Anderson's kind of brand of visual comedy is, I'm kind of the target audience for it, and so it delivered what I expected, and satisfyingly so. So I enjoyed the movie. I think Wes Anderson is really at home in animation. It really blends to his style of directing. And, it's a pretty simple movie, but it's done well. And, I really enjoyed it.
All right, cool. I appreciate the animation of this movie. Visually, it's stunning to watch. It's a very beautifully animated film, and stop motion isn't something we see often. I'm glad that we're seeing a lot more of it in recent years with Anomalisa, with this, with Kubo. Like, we are seeing a bit more of it making a comeback, but you guys, like, I knew it. I knew when I saw the trailer. And I saw that mushroom cloud go off, and I was like, no, there's gonna be something that's gonna bother me. There's gonna be something here that he's gonna not get right. And it's true. There are certain things in this movie, like things that just, if you know where to look, you can't unsee what you're seeing, where it's just, I don't know, he just doesn't, we're gonna get into the whole discussion of cultural appropriation and all that, but, it's just a little, from the perspective, I don't know, there were a lot of cringeworthy moments for me, and they kind of, it got close to spoiling the rest of the film. Because it's just, there are certain tropes that they use, certain things that I found to be unnecessary. But in terms of animation, it's a beautiful movie. I haven't really seen any other Wes Anderson movie. I think I started watching, what's that one about the hotel? Oh god.
The Grand Budapest
Hotel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started watching that one. I don't know if I finished it, but I didn't see, I think it's called The Fantastic Mr. Fox. But yeah, there are some issues with this movie. That doesn't detract from its prettiness, that doesn't detract from the voice acting. I think the voice acting was really great, despite the fact that all the dogs were voiced basically by white people. But despite the fact that they're Japanese dogs are voiced by white people. Sure, we'll get into that later. But yeah. So talk to me about this animation and this narrative. Like, is there any other thing that, if you guys have to convince someone without spoiling anything, like what would you guys say to them?
Well, I'd say that it feels very storybooky. Like it follows a very linear narrative. You begin with a character that appears very rough, and they slowly get, acquainted with another character, and they become more soft after learning things about himself, and learn like it's all very by the numbers, so to speak. But because of the fact that the character is likable, and the director uses music and the visuals to help you get into the character, I think that all definitely helps it to feel very. I think cozy is almost the word. Like if just in terms of the narrative. Like I've even seen reviews like people like falling asleep to it, but like this movie makes me feel peaceful kind of way. But like in that sense, I guess it's a movie worth watching, in that it is very hard trying to appeal to your feel good nature if you can focus on just the narrative without going into the details that we'll get into later that may or may not spoil your experience of the movie.
Yeah. What about you, Ryan? Any kind of like last non-spoiler thing before we dive into the good stuff?
It's a movie where, I think you have to buy in to Wes Anderson's brand of comedy. You have to be kind of accepting. It takes place in very much this surrealist version of of the world, where it's set in the future, everything's retro, crazy things are going to happen, and they're just going to be played straight. But if you enjoy it, he's using his trademark style of everything is very linear, everything is blocked out, so that it's flat, and you can control everything in this. You can control everything in the scene because it's all animated and everything's put in there for a purpose. And so I think if you enjoy stop motion animation and just kind of like the craft of filmmaking on that level, by all means, like, watch this movie. And if if you like Wes Anderson's other movies, like, you'll probably like this one. And at the end of the day, it's a story about a kid looking for his dog, and then some other hijinks happen in between. So, it gets my recommendation.
All right, cool. I will end the non-spoiler section just giving.
Thank goodness. Let me just say, it's hard to explain like what this movie is without spoiling things, to the point where like even the first trailer pretty much gives away the entire story. Because I don't know how you can really make this movie likable without describing exactly what happens.
Right, true. But before I do end on spoiler, I will do very quickly. I want to quote some of the reviews that I cannot recommend enough for people. Like, if you want, even if you've seen the movie already and you want kind of some critical engagement with the finished product, I highly recommend the Mashable review of the film by Angie Han. Okay, so I'm going to quote something from it, which we'll get into it, but I need to stress this. Because again, I think it's safe to say none of us are Asian. Not East Asian, at least. So just to put some of East Asian voices into this, East Asian American in this case, Angie Han wrote, in a movie where the leads are largely inhuman, it's the humans who end up feeling like the inscrutable foreigners. Isle of Dogs falls into a long history of American art othering or dehumanizing Asians, borrowing their, quote, exotic cultures and settings while disregarding the people who created those cultures and live in those settings. So, if that kind of critical engagement interests you, read her review. It's my favorite of the whole bunch that have come out. And just keep that in mind, that it's a very pretty movie, but there's some stuff going on that need to be discussed, and that's not like a spoiler warning kind of thing. It's just, you can see it from the trailer. That if you have that kind of cringeworthy reaction from the trailer, it will continue in this movie. So keep that in mind. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the spoilers. Leave if you don't want to be spoiled. And I know that a lot of people haven't seen this movie because of the limited release. It's been getting like good feedback from the people who have seen it, and it's been getting it's been making money in the few theaters that have shown it, so it will probably expand. But if it takes like 3 weeks, I'm so sorry. That's just how limited releases work. That's just
I
how
believe
works.
last I heard, April 11th is what they're aiming for wide release date.
So you will have your chance, hopefully. I can't explain distribution. It's weird. All right, so spoiler warning. We're gonna get into it. So when we start this movie with a prologue, where we're introduced to this historic battle between the Kobayashi clan and these wild dogs. And although the war ends with Kobayashi losing, the dogs end up domesticated, and then we fast forward 20 years into the future, in Japan, in a futuristic Japan. The movie takes place in Megasaki City, where a dog flu virus spreads throughout the canine population. The authoritarian mayor, Kobayashi, signed a decree banishing all dogs to Trash Island, despite a scientist, Professor Watanabe, insisting that he is close to finding a cure. The first dog to be banished is Spots, who belonged to Atari Kobayashi, the orphan nephew of the mayor. So guys, tell me about this opening. Like, did you like it? Did you think it did enough to set the tone? Like, walk me through what you thought when this movie just opened. So, Alex.
I definitely think it set up the tone really well. I like the narrator. He's the droopy dog style. Just his image alone is funny, and him having this deep voice is kind of perfect just to set up the story. And it was all relatively easy to follow, but because of the fact that they're kind of spelling it out to you in this prologue, which I think it was a little odd at first, because it's like, okay, well, do we really need this layout? Is this not going to be evident from the rest of the movie? But it worked enough, and it was quick enough to not really be that much of an issue.
Do you think that, given how the film uses language, it kind of needed it though?
I think if you remove the prologue, I think you could still get it from the rest of the movie.
Okay. I mean, even if someone hasn't seen the trailer, they just go in blind.
I think so.
Okay.
Because they mention all these things again and again throughout the movie, whether it be through the translator later or through the dogs themselves saying things. You would pick up enough to get the story without this prologue if they decided to go in that direction.
Gotcha. Ryan, what did you think about this kind of prologue section?
Well, I think it's important because it bookends with the it starts and ends with the taika drums, and it grounds it in this like kabuki theater, and then also, I mean, interlaced throughout is like the Kurosawa influences, and it opens with the title. The title crawl with the text that constantly flashes up on the screen.
Oh, is this also like the same part where the people are drumming and they're showing the cast?
Or is it?
Does that happen before the prologue or after the prologue? I don't remember.
I mean, part one is when we are first introduced to like the dogs, but like to the actual main dog characters that we
No.
meet.
I mean,
like
the credits sequence where they're showing the cast names and they have the people drumming. Like that sequence is incredible. Like one of the best opening sequences I've seen in a while. Like to introduce the name of your film and all the people. Like that was just great to watch.
Yeah, and then it's brought back at the end. And I mean, he wanted to introduce, they wanted to introduce the kind of conceit of all of the characters' lines are spoken in their actual language, and it's just that and then all the dogs' lines, all the dog barks have been rendered into English and kind of
that text got a laugh out of my audience. Like,
yeah,
it just popped up, parts to be translated. Great.
I mean, like you had to go in the movie knowing it's gonna be quirky, and this is like right up. It starts out delivering what it's offering.
So do you agree? Do you think that this part like needed to explain the language?
I don't think it needed to explain it. I think it wanted to explain it.
Gotcha.
I think it takes joy in thoroughly like in how much it plays with it and wants to it prominently puts it out there, and it's not necessary, but a lot of things aren't necessary.
I guess should we take this opportunity to just go into this for the rest of the movie, because like also in the trailer of the movie there's the line where the dog goes, "I wish we could speak his language." So like even from the advertising, they're like making this a big thing. And as you mentioned in the review that you cited, it does feel making the Japanese humans in this instance feel more distant. And at least from my point of view, like you can understand the superficial intention of it, right? Like you want it to be from the perspective of the dogs, so you want the humans to be secondary. But the problem is when you also are adding in language to it, adding into it a different culture, like that's adding in other implications that maybe you didn't intend, but they come off that way when you're doing it in such an obvious manner and to the point of even like making fun of it at some points.
And I mean, we do have one human that can speak English and can communicate. And who is that? It's the white chick who decides to save everybody. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're right. It does. There is this kind of, they could have easily changed things. They could have just kept the Japanese, kept the idea, but just put subtitles. Yes, so people could actually understand, people could at least understand what everyone else was saying. But the whole purpose was that they're not supposed to.
So I think that, if I can talk, I think that, there was gonna be a danger of, is this homage, or is it, does it? And I would say it kind of does. It borders on kind of fetishistic, the treatment of, Japan is this, the movie there's nothing in this movie that really needed to be set in Japan except that, it's a stand-in for, this weird, surreal kind of other thing that the West views it as, and we needed to make the human characters unintelligible, and so we're going to do that by making them speak Japanese and then not do the subtitles. If you wanted to do it in a futuristic setting, or you wanted to. There were other ways of you could have completely fictionalized it. They could have made them unintelligible in some other way, and then you still keep the perspective of you're seeing this through the lens of the dogs, right? Which is what I feel is the main intention of doing the language this way. Of you're not supposed to understand what they're saying. And except for the several instances where like it's very obvious that they're not speaking, proper Japanese. They're speaking the Romanized versions of it, the sitto. They're not actually saying like, it's the, when Atari goes to pet Spots for the first time and the majordomo says, no, it's not it's a guard dog. It's not a pet. It's they're using the Romanji. They say, not to guard dogu or guard dogu not to petto. Like you're supposed to understand what he's saying. And so they're not, like a traditional Japanese speaker wouldn't say that. Moments like that kind of stand out. And then I also agree that it's not helping its case when it makes they needed a human character, to be able to communicate with the audience. And so they get around that by making them an English American foreign exchange student. Making the one character that you can understand white. And so like our other main, lens that we're seeing the story play out through is through the only white character. So I think it's certainly problematic. And I agree with that. But I can also like see the story decisions in it as well.
I mean, I understand the story decisions. It's kind of the same thing as like, say, any random commercial that does something that's culturally insensitive. It's like there was a group of people who saw this and went, this is a great idea. And no one cared to even think like, maybe we should try something a little bit more interesting. And it's just really frustrating because like, even if you actually just, why make it dogs? There is literally an island in Japan that is only with cats. If you had just simply done like the cats instead of dogs, easy, super easy. You could have done like, okay, well, there's an actual place in Japan. We can actually cement this in an actual realistic place.
But I don't think that was ever the intent to make it realistic. That's like the issue is from the very seeds of the project.
Why use Japanese? Why actually make the humans look realistic? Why make the dogs look realistic? It's this, why have drones? It's just like, you can't just pick and choose what you decide to be realistic and what you don't decide to be realistic. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're gonna be crazy, like, that's not a good enough reason. Like, that's still like, I don't know. Just because it's pretty is not enough for me to go, oh yes, that makes every problematic thing okay.
I mean,
look past it rather than okay, but rather I can look past it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
and just before we move on, like from the language thing, I do want to recommend another article that's very enlightening on this by Emily Yoshida.
Yes,
she writes for Vulture, and she has an article, "What It's Like to Watch Isle of Dogs as a Japanese Speaker." And there she gives a good input on just like how the Japanese itself also comes off as a bit distancing from the fact that a lot of the Japanese dialogue is muffled. So like even people who understand Japanese have a bit of a hard time understanding what they're saying. And as Ryan already mentioned, at times it's very cut up and short to the point for the purposes of international audiences getting it. But in the process of doing that, you make the Japanese seem just not important. And like that's just a very bad image to give off, that like you're setting while you're pretending it's made up, but it's obvious to everyone where the influence is coming from. And in that sense, you're not giving the influence its respect.
I'm trying, it's just whenever, especially with this opening, that is so visually captivating, right? And even like just with not when Atari lands, which by the way, Atari really, that's the reference you're gonna go with, but moving on, not when he lands in the island, but when we first do see him is in that kind of shot we have of him once Spots is taken. And he's kind of covered in shadow and like, that's a beautifully framed shot. Beautiful framing. But at the same time, I'm thinking, oh, your name's Atari, and oh no, like why? And I struggle to figure out what the purpose of this taking place in Japan is. Like, why Japan? Like, they didn't properly tell me, like, oh, this is why. It was I feel like the only reason it took place in Japan was simply because he's a fan of Kurosawa and he's a fan of Miyazaki, and he was like, I'm gonna do it here because I'm a fan of this culture. But it's like, but do you actually know the history? If you did know the history, I don't know if you would have gone for so many explosions. Or I don't know if you would have made all the dogs, which in turn are voiced by these recognizable white actors, you would have made them the internment camp sent people. Or dogs, rather, but you know what I mean. You know, it's kind of like, well, I don't know. There is something about this movie. But yeah, now that we got the language down and we've talked about the prologue, let's continue. So 6 months later, Atari runs away from home, like we see in the trailer. He steals a plane and flies to Trash Island to find Spots, his guard dog. After crash landing, he is rescued by 5 dogs, Rex, King, Duke, Boss, and Chief. They decide to help Atari locate Spots, although Chief, a former stray, is reluctant to fraternize with humans. Initially believing he died months ago after his cage failed to open upon arrival, the dogs soon learned that there was a mix-up, and Spots may be alive elsewhere on the island.
The reveal where they show his tag being half covered. Like, first they show the tag being half covered. It's like, okay, well, this is gonna show up later on. And like, it's like only a couple minutes later, so I'm glad that they didn't stretch out that part too much. Yeah. And the reveal was funny enough.
I was worried. I was like, oh, like, part of me wished that he was dead. I mean, it's fine. It's not like a problem, but part of me was hoping that Spots had died. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but, I
mean, it would have been a different story. It would have been less storybooky if we went in that direction. Like, the way it's going right now, like, we're going very linear. Like, I'm here to find this. Okay, let's help you find this. And we end up finding it. So, it's very linear. That would have been a different direction to take it. Also, before all this crash landing, I think this is also the spot where we're introduced to the dogs and they have this fight with the other pack of wild dogs and they fight over the garbage. Like, that scene is pretty funny. But also, like, there is the moment where one of the dogs bites off the other dog's ear and you see the bloodiness.
That's
and like,
Chief for us.
Yeah, it was Chief. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like that's like I think that's the moment. It's like, okay, well, this is why this is PG-13, and I was waiting for a little bit more later in the movie, and we never really get anything beyond that. So like, I just wonder, like, why is this movie PG-13?
That is a good question.
Like, they didn't really use it for anything besides that one scene.
Do you think maybe it's also like the imagery of like, you know, you do have Atari being at the end, you have him being like hurt physically, and you do have like his injury on his head and the blood, and you do have like, you know, the worms and the food. Like, there are certain imagery that may be strong for younger audiences, possibly.
I mean, the worms and the food, like we just covered Early Man a couple of weeks ago. Like, that had imagery that was more disgusting than that.
That is true. But I mean, there's also like language, not Japanese language, but dialogue. And like, there's certain like innuendos, certain things, and I don't see a PG-13 movie. Not PG-13, a PG movie with I think the line I most hate from this movie, which is when Chief says like, tell that bitch, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, really? Really? Like, that's a joke, but anyway, like, maybe it's that.
Also the culminating line where he like confronts Spots like, you son of a bitch.
Right.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah, well, like, that's the joke, right?
Yeah,
but, but the problem is the meaning that the word has gotten in, you know, actual English language. Not just that,
but the fact that there are rarely any female dogs, period. It's like, if we had a diversity of female dogs and not have it be such a sausage fest, then maybe you can go and say bitch whenever you want. But because it doesn't, I'm like, I'm gonna call you out on it. But yeah, which dogs stand out to you guys? Which are the ones that you're like, okay, this is my dog. This is the dog I'm gonna like ride for till the end.
Well, I think a small problem with this movie is that Chief is the only one who stands up from the very beginning because he's the one who's acting different. All these other ones, like, they have their little quirks. Like, there's the one that says, like, oh, I heard a rumor that this, and then everybody like, whoa, what? Which is a funny gag. But the problem is, like, since they're all together all the time, I can't really distinguish between them. Like, I can't remember which one is Rex, which one is Duke, which one is Boss. Unless I'm like in the middle of watching the movie, but like 5 minutes later, I couldn't tell you. But Chief is the one who stands out from the very beginning, and he's the one who gets his own arc. So at the end of the day, I think that Chief is the only strong character among this group of 5 dogs.
Right. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, Chief is definitely the strongest character. But there's a lot I like, especially even in the side characters. Like, I really liked Oracle. I think that the running gag of Oracle being able to predict the future by just being able to understand TV was fantastic. And I don't know, there's something about the way, I mean, Pug's eyes always look kind of weird, but just the way their eyes were animated, I really loved. And I think there were some truly like heartwarming scenes with Spots, but certainly the dog that stole the show was Chief.
Right. Do you guys think that because I personally loved like the interactions with the dogs, like when they were just like, I just remember that scene where they're like, where Atari gives a command and then Chief is the only one who doesn't follow it, and everyone's like, you need to sit! Mm-hmm. Like, I personally, I'm like, I like when this group is together, and while I agree, Chief is the most developed character. I would argue he is our protagonist in all of this. But, you know, I do like this dynamic of this group, and it is a shame that we don't get enough of it. Like, yeah, I would prefer an entire movie of just them, like, trying to figure things out, and the humans just being completely out of this movie, and just have it be about these dogs trying to make do, or trying to get back home, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. That they are funny when they show up, for sure. I'm not saying that they're bad in that sense, but it's more in the fact that because they kind of disappear halfway through the movie, you lose the connection that you were growing with them. So by the end of the movie, you're like, oh yeah, they were nice, but your mind is in a different place by the end of the movie. So it almost feels like that part of it could have been its own movie, like seeing all of them together. But like the moment where they have the separation is kind of where the movie takes a different course.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think also just that it's hard to separate, you know, Rex, Duke, King, you know, all the others. They kind of they never exist independently. It's always them as a group, and then Chief, and then you also, and like Spots gets to be his own character, but the other dogs always, you know, they hardly ever get a chance to really shine independently of the group. And I think that kind of goes to, I mean, sort of the theme of the other one. You know, they're always voting the same way. You know, it's they're very, you know, they listen to Atari when he commands them to sit. You know,
they're followers.
They're followers. Yeah.
Which, I mean, and this I will say may perhaps be reading into things, but the fact that the main focus is on the dog that is so individualistic versus the dogs that are seen as kind of a collective, are treated as barely, don't have any development and aren't seen as doing much. It also is another reminder of this kind of Western interpretation of how things should be, and that it's very heavy reliance on the individual and not on the collective. Just a reading throwing out there that just hit me.
On the other hand, when has a movie ever been about a follower?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like 90% of movies are about people who go against the fray or things like that. Like that's pretty much the entire movie industry.
Okay, well, moving on. So by the way, that I love that when they fight, it's in a cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I love that little detail. I don't know. It reminds me of kind of like old cartoons. And I adore that. So, after a skirmish with a rescue team sent by Kobayashi to retrieve Atari, and at the insistence of a female purebred named Nutmeg, who is one of the 2 female dogs in this movie.
Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson, of course, because who else would voice the pretty romantic interest to the other dog?
I mean, we're glad she arrived from Ghost in the Shell to do this role. It's really brave of her.
Oh man, great way to bring that in. Great way. She couldn't just play a Japanese woman. She had to play a Japanese dog too. Like, it wasn't enough. But yeah, so at the insistence of a female purebred named Nutmeg, Chief has a change of heart and decides to accompany Atari and company on their search. They seek advice from sage dogs, Jupiter and Oracle, who inform them of a rumored cannibal tribe of dogs on an isolated part of the island. Very quickly, I don't know if I forgot to mention this, but I'm using the Wikipedia plot because it lays everything out really well. Thank you.
Yeah, because I feel like we're skipping like the whole like actually walking to the sage dogs. I feel like that's a huge chunk, but at the same time, like because all of this blends, like I can't tell you what happens when. Like if this is the moment where they arrive at the abandoned amusement park, or does that come after they've met?
No, that came after. That came when they separated. This is like when there's like that shot of like the line of the dogs all walking and that song comes in.
Right, and also I think this is where they're all together, and there's the abandoned golf club, and they have like little talks about like, hey, what was your favorite food and things like that.
Right.
Getting to know the characters, which is
it's really getting to know Chief, not really the other characters.
Yeah. I mean, you get good jokes like something about like I get steak on my birthday, or the people, or like the mascot just learning that the food he was advertising is no longer being made. It's like, wait, what? So like I don't know. There were funny moments in all of them being together that I think like it's a very low key thing, so it's hard to remember specific jokes that stand out, but I just felt very like calm in those moments as they're walking to Jupiter and the Oracle.
And not just that, but like this part of the movie like flies by. This is a part of the movie. I don't know how long it is in comparison to the other parts of the movie, but this opening and then this like part 1, like the way it's paced is incredible, because it just keeps going and you're invested and it's like it flies by. But yeah, now we move to the humans. So Professor Watanabe finds a cure. Like he finally finds the cure, but is poisoned by Kobayashi, so the dogs can remain on the island.
Okay, let's also say the scene where they're making the sushi to poison him is incredible.
That is the only place where I was like I read this review. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was one that was recently published in The Atlantic.
The Atlantic, yes.
And that's the only one that actually justifies it being in Japan. The only one. And it's like, well, it wasn't necessary. It could have been replaced with something else. But in terms of something you can only find in Japan, that would be the scene. But yeah. So, poisoned by Kobayashi, he dies. Sadly. Poor Professor Watanabe. And this is when we're introduced to, well, not introduced because we saw her in the prologue. We saw her in the beginning. But this is when we truly meet foreign exchange student Tracy Walker. She suspects a conspiracy and begins to investigate. She confronts assistant scientist Yoko Ono, voiced by Yoko Ono, mind you.
Okay, let me say this. I did not know she was actually named Yoko Ono in the movie until after I left. Like after I read reviews and they were referring to her as Yoko Ono, I was like, wait, they're using character names in the rest of the review. Why are they going, wait a minute. But like, what kind of decision is that?
I feel like that's more of the Wes Anderson sensibility. Like, of course Yoko Ono would be called Yoko Ono, you know? Like, that to me isn't, like, that big of a thing, but it is, for me, this scene really just encaptures everything wrong with Tracy. This scene where she just confronts Yoko and then smacks her. And it's so, like, if there was ever a movie or a scene that truly exemplified white feminism, this would be it. Because not only do you have Tracy, and you introduce her as this kind of white savior trope, she's the one who cares about the dogs and everybody else doesn't care. She's the one who has the initiative while everyone else is like, oh well, the dogs are gone. And then here's this woman, the adult, two, someone who, the scientist, the one who could actually, have the credibility to prove like, hey, this is the cure. And she has to shake her. Tracy's the one who has to shake her and be like, you need to do something. And not even do that. She's like, you can't help me. I'm gonna smack you. Goodbye. And it's, Tracy, why? Why must you? Why? I'm gonna quote Angie Hahn again from Mashable, cause I really love this sentence that she wrote. It's a portrayal that is as flattering to Tracy as it is unflattering to the Japanese. I tried to think. I was like, what possible thing could he have done to save this character, what could have been done differently with this character, this precocious young girl who's like a journalist and wants to, solve this mystery. Like, what could we have done that could have mixed things up? Simple. Just make her Japanese. Make her this Japanese girl, saving the world, put subtitles, then we're good. But for some reason, we can't have that.
Yeah,
but,
and also, like, we skipped the school scene, which I think is actually where she's introduced. And, like, there as well, like, she's being so stereotypical, like, blowing bubble gum while I think she's got, like, an American flag scarf around her. And everybody's like, oh, that's not true. Or like, what proof do you have? And, like, it feels so rote, like that scene. And we also have the cutaway to the Japanese hacker who will show up later, but also we can talk a little bit about the stereotypicalness of that. But yeah, like from the very beginning, you're like, wow, like you stand out like a sore thumb, and I'm not sure what prevents the movie from keeping you Japanese like the rest of the humans and the story still having the same impact?
And I think about it, like, she could have, like, kept, like, the blonde hair, because that's such an anime quality. They could have just made that as, like, a joke, like, the protagonist, like, the person who we care about is gonna have, like, the crazy hair. But, and it just really bothered me that you're an exchange student, honey. You should know Japanese by now. Like, you should, or at least when you're talking to everybody else, they shouldn't be responding to you in English. You should be responding to them in Japanese. We have that one scene with her host family, but with all the students, with everybody, she just speaks English. And it's like, there's no point. There's no reason why you should. If we're gonna be that realistic with how everybody else speaks Japanese, you should be able to speak Japanese too. Which is just really frustrating. But Ryan, tell us your take of Tracy Walker.
She's a problematic character. I mean, down to her, her choice of the choice of hairstyle they give her, and it hurts me because every problematic choice, it's like it's the artifice of filmmaking, like, comes through in it. It's like, I understand completely, like, why every decision was made to make this character. It's, and I wish that, what she needed was to show empathy to Yoko Ono, but she has to be the precocious, reporter, young reporter, and her hairstyle is chosen to exemplify her precociousness, and also, like, so when she enters the lab / bar that she finds Yoko Ono in, where they serve everything in, like, beakers and Erlenmeyer flasks, like, the blocking of that scene, I mean, I adore, because she opens the door, and then and she has such a distinctive silhouette where, her you can tell immediately from her shadow that plays on the wall, like who this is, even if without even hearing her voice or anything. And she walks in, and so and then having her speak to the other Japanese characters when she should be able to, and we know already that she can speak Japanese because she speaks Japanese to her host family, but then they all speak to her in English, and it's like, it's because he didn't want to do the subtitles for the whole thing, but occasionally you need to let the audience in on the plot, and so you have to have this English speaking character, and it does. Those stories, like those choices that were made to further the narrative and are ways to construct the story. I agree. They don't outweigh that she is a poorly conceived and a problematic character in this film.
As you were talking, I was thinking maybe instead of subtitles, like, this is supposed to be a wacky, kind of quirky type of film, right? Maybe it was in the structure. Maybe if they had actually used the translator and had her, like, in a way be, break the fourth wall in a way, and always include her whenever the Japanese was happening. So just have her just randomly appear being like, da, 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 like this is what she says. And then have no one acknowledge her. But have her be there. One, it would have made it, a little wacky, but I mean, it's fine. That's part of what we're supposed to get. I don't know, maybe that would have helped, and then you still would have kept the Japanese, but then you had the English from the translator, so it would have made sense. Or I don't know, maybe that.
Also, like, did they show those machines that they have also to translate automatically Kobayashi's speeches? Like, what if just everyone is carrying those around, Yeah,
and I mean, and speaking of the translator, because I do want to point, I don't know where else to put this in, but she's always the one on TV, even when, like, it's Japanese people watching, she's the one, she's translating. It's like, there's no need for her to be the one translating in these real life settings, because if this were in Japan, then you would just have the Japanese person on the news. But then on TV, you'd have her be the one to relay the news to people. So it's, again, another example of, it's like, they're trying to be realistic, but at the same time, they're not really committing to it because they're lacking in commitment to this realism. So it's just very, very frustrating to watch and think about. If you just turn your brain off, it's like, sure, I can look past this, but most people can't turn their brain off. Well, so it's kind of like, oh, come on, dude, do your homework.
I mean, to be fair, okay, so, they do sometimes break away from their conceit of we're never, unless, she or there's one other translator, and
the young boy, I think.
No, the woman reporter.
Are you thinking of the main interpreter or Francis?
Yeah, the main
McDormand?
interpreter. There's
that's the one she was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, yes. Yeah. Then in that case, yeah. Sorry. There's also the like the narrator will sometimes also interject.
Which again is a way to use. It doesn't have to be the interpreter. It could have been the narrator being like, they just said blah blah blah, and it could have been funny.
But so as for trying to and not quite committing to realism, I don't like. I mean, this is it never really tries for realism. Like it's always is like it's always surreal. The type of technology that we see in this, and the way that things are simultaneously like futuristic with the robot dogs, and then also like they're I couldn't tell sometimes whether it was the 60s or 2020. It falls somewhere in between in every scene. So I don't think like commitment to strict realism was necessarily the intent.
Well, I mean, if it's not the intent, then why do they focus so much in just visually? They do focus a lot in details on, we have to make this look like, Japanese. We have to make this look, we gotta get the drums. We have to get them moving at the same time. There is a dedication to realism just because of what stop motion is. So there is a dedication there. There is like a rule set that they are following. There is a limit to what they see as realistic. Cause if, at the same time, if they weren't gonna be realistic, why make everybody look the way they look? Which is a more realistic kind of take, instead of making them have the anime eyes, you know? So there is this dedication. Like, it's just, for me, that's not a good enough reason, cause there are moments where this movie is realistic. So it's kind of like, for me, it's like, alright, so you wanna be, like, if you're gonna be wacky, but then if you want to be real, like, it was just in this very murky gray area where it's like, it wanted to be realistic in some senses. It wanted the dogs to feel real, to look like dogs. Like, they wanted the fur to be something you think you could touch. And yet they also wanted the TVs to have the wrong person saying the wrong thing, just for the sake of solving this ridiculous issue this ridiculous problem that they themselves have created for themselves by using Japanese in the way they did. Well, so it's kind of like...
Yeah, let me just say, like, I haven't watched Wes Anderson movies, but from what I gathered, this is his entire style. Like you mentioned earlier, like him picking and choosing what to take from realism and what to take from surrealism, you can't do that. But that's been Wes Anderson's deal the entire time he's been making movies. So I think the issue is, if you don't buy into that, like straddling the line between realism and surrealism, if you can't get past that and like see the issues in trying to blend those things to the point that it feels stilted in many ways, like, it's just going to be hard to enjoy that kind of movie. It's even worse in this particular film, where you're adding the whole cultural parallels side to things. But just in a philosophical sense, like, at least to me, I don't mind at all the fact that you're doing like half surreal, half real, because like that's just a different kind of movie than what I'm used to, and I'm fine with uniqueness, with eccentricity. But it's adding the whole cultural stuff that is bothersome, but not necessarily the fact that you're adding surreal to real.
See, but here's the thing: you could do surreal, and like most of the stuff in this movie, you could keep the surreal and the real. The problem is these little moments that simply had to be changed in a different way or composed in a different way just to give you that sense of authenticity of, oh, they actually thought this through. It's not a question of surrealism and realism. It's a sense of logic. And don't say that there isn't logic in surrealism. There's some type of thinking in the way things are presented to us. So it's kind of like, this isn't a problem with this mesh of realism, surrealism. It's a plot hole. It is a plot hole.
It's about Wes Anderson's take on how to construct film, and so I think that this movie especially is the reason why I think that Wes Anderson is as at home at animation, even having not done it as often, is as at home in animation as he is because he's famous for his mise en scene. Everything in the frame is put there specifically because he wants to control everything. He thinks of film like theater. You know, he wants to be in complete control, and he does this through like difficult blocking in his live action movies that take inordinate amount of takes with crazy camera movements. And then in animation, when he has, especially stop motion animation, where you have incredible control over the blocking of the scene. What goes in there, you had to actually physically construct and put it there. And so the level of realism in this movie is you wouldn't expect anything else from a Wes Anderson movie. So like the insane amount of detail that goes into this, and then he's able to do fast by stripping out, visual information, that animation allows you to do, he's able to have these like fast cuts and quick inserts. And I mean, that all lends to the visually what you're seeing and the realism, but the surrealist elements, there is the fear that, okay, it's set in the mystical West. I mean, the mystical, the Far East, and it's the Westerners' interpretation of this, and the quirkiness of the setting can be interpreted as, seeing Japan as this weird, if strange things are happening in the movie, it's because, well, Japan is a strange place, and it makes sense for this. But really, that's any of his movies. That's, the insane logic that is logic, like, that the characters internal to the story make, that are not necessary, like, that don't make sense to us as the audience. Like, that happens in any one of his movies, and it's not limited to this. And so, and I don't think that there is a level of cultural appropriation, but I think that, like, a lot of his references and things are done earnestly. Like, you had mentioned the song that they play as they're walking towards the other end of the island, and I lost it in the theater when the main theme to Seven Samurai started playing, and like it seemed like completely earnestly, and I think that there's always the homage and references. It can be a slippery slope to a sort of, like fetishistic pandering, or like not giving things the due reverence that they deserve. And he starts to edge towards that, but I don't think it's as grievous as it could seem. If I can finish my rant.
No, that's fair. Yeah. That's fair. I personally don't think style, or that's just the way he is, or that's just his style, is enough for me to look past like a very evident plot hole and thing. Like, I just personally, that's just not enough. I'm like, oh, it's quirky. That's not a good enough excuse for me. And it's I just always have an urge to fight the Orientalism, kind of the romanticization of whether it's the Middle East, the Far East, doesn't matter, the East in general.
And I think it's important to separate the two things. Like, it's one thing to talk about the style of this movie, and I feel it's another thing to talk about the cultural appropriation. They do blend in certain moments, but I do think that you can appreciate one thing while also denouncing the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, moving on. Okay, dude, we're halfway through this movie and we're over an hour. Okay,
we? There's not much that happens after this.
Exactly. There's not much. It's a pretty simple story. But yeah, so after Tracy gets the last remaining dose from Yoko, because for some reason Tracy needs to have it, she's the only one who can have it. We go back to the journey with Atari and Chief and the rest of the dogs. Atari and Chief get separated from the others. Atari and him bond finally, and Atari decides to bathe him and notices that he is actually not black with white spots, but white with black spots. There was just a lot of soot in his fur, I guess.
Is this a reference to the classic film Madagascar? Anybody?
Could it possibly be? I mean, I wouldn't put it past Wes Anderson,
A classic, a real pinnacle of Asian cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But, so yeah, he bathes him and notices that he is Spot's breed, which implies that he's his brother.
See,
we'll get into that link.
I initially thought, oh, so is Chief actually Spots? And there's like a memory thing going on here? Like, I thought that was the direction he's going to go in. So the brother thing actually took me a little bit by surprise in the end.
Yeah, there are so many dogs. So many dogs. What are the odds? This is one of those like kind of fairy tale kind of things where it's like.
Well, that's what we said from the very beginning. They set it up as a fairy tale tone, and that's what they're going with throughout the entire movie.
That's why, and also, as I was writing the outline, I kind of convinced myself into like accepting it because we'll get into it once we meet up with Spots. But yeah, so Chief reveals that he was once a house pet, but was forced to flee after regretfully, attacking his master out of fear. So they rejoin the group and find the isolated tribe, but are ambushed by the Kobayashi's men. Spots arrives with a small army of dogs and saves the day and helps fend off Kobayashi's men. And through flashbacks, we get to know Spots, and he reveals that he was rescued upon arrival by the tribe, and later became their leader. Spots also confirms that Chief is his brother and asks to transfer his protection duties to Atari to Chief, and both agree because Spots has puppies now and has other responsibilities. So the reason why I kind of buy this kind of family link is because there is no other way. No other way, and here is an example of the movie actually somewhat relying on logic. There's no other way that he would have trusted Chief that quickly if they weren't family. Like, if you take the family element out, like, Atari was Spot's, like, life for a good chunk. Like, this was the boy he needed to protect. It's one thing to him have conflicts about what he can do and what he can't do, but the fact that he so quickly transitioned the responsibility to Chief, for me, it only works because they're related.
Yeah,
so that's how I kind of worked my way around that. Because at first I was like, really? They're related? But then I was like, well, given where the story wants to go, it's like there's no other option, I guess. So it was fine for me.
Yeah, I chalk it up as a good story decision, and their interactions when they finally figure it out, like they begin very hostile. We have the son of a bitch line, but eventually they talk to each other. They have like the moment where they're on the ship and they're talking to each other. Like that all feels relatively earnest, and I think the movie does enough to sell us on the fact that there's still this familial connection that's enough for both of them.
Right. Yeah. How about you, Ryan? What do you think of Spots and his relationship with Chief?
I think that, we kind of towards the tail end of, I honestly didn't mean to do the pun.
No.
Of their journey, we start to see a lot of really heartwarming moments with Chief. I mean, we get he tears up at getting the biscuit. And he really starts to care for Atari. And I think that, when it really culminates in how Chief defends, Atari, when Spots was going to say that, yeah, I can't be I'm giving up on him as his bodyguard, and I'm giving up my position, and how fiercely Chief turns on him for that, I think is really strong. And then we get the line when he finds out that he was his brother was either runt and not anymore. Like, I really enjoyed those. I mean, I really enjoyed seeing the bond that they had, and like, I think it's where the movie is at its most like heartwarming.
But do you guys think it would have been better for Chief's character had they not been family, but he still proved himself to be worth passing the torch to? Like, because there is this risk where it's like, if they weren't family, Chief had to have needed to work harder to prove himself. And do you think that would have, even though he's the most developed character, do you think that would have been better for Chief, and if anything better for Chief and Atari's relationship, and that you actually had to show how deep it quickly became.
Well, I think the issue is that at this point in the movie, the focus is like at the beginning of the movie, we're focusing mainly on the dogs. But at this point in the movie, we have half our focus split on the dogs and half our focus split on the humans' plots and Tracy trying to solve the issues. So I don't think there's enough time to really get Chief to like prove himself even more in front of Spots. Like I think if you remove the family part, the alternative would just be, well, hey, like Chief saying, hey, well, look, I protected Atari all this time. Look what I've done for him. It are things that you couldn't do on your own. Like they could have like that little scene of just explaining what he's done and Spots accepting it. But I think that would be a little bit worse than what ends up happening, which is the familial relationship. But so like in that, like you could make it work, but I just don't think there's enough time. And at this point, the tone in the movie has changed too much for us to focus sufficiently on giving Chief that even more screen time than he's already getting at this point in the split focus of the movie.
Gotcha. Ryan, anything to add?
Yeah, I think he was already there, even without adding the familial relationship. I think by the time that that Chief makes that turn, it's already and that Spots gives him the position as guard dog. I think he was already there as we see how protective he is of Atari, and I think that if it wasn't a direct link of these dogs are joined by they were litter mates or their siblings or whatever. I think that the thematic that they have a bond of they both truly care about Atari, I think would have been enough. But at the same time, I don't think it detracts anything that they ended up being siblings. I think we see two very different paths that you can go on, and him being Spot's sibling makes him no less the stray dog, and like it doesn't like lessen his experiences or anything.
Gotcha. All right, so we move forward with the plot. So an owl arrives, revealing that Kobayashi plans to exterminate all dogs on Trash Island upon his imminent re-election. Atari and the dog tribe decide to return to Megasaki City to attempt to prevent this. At Kobayashi's election ceremony, he prepares to give the order, but Tracy presents her evidence of his corruption and the cure's existence. Atari and the dogs also arrive and confirm the cure's work. Kobayashi has a change of heart, but his right-hand man, Major Domo, insists upon seeing the extermination through. A fight ensues in which the button is pressed, but the poison backfires on the captors instead, thanks to the hacker friend of Tracy's, allowing them to escape. We've talked for over an hour, and we haven't mentioned Kobayashi or Major Domo, like the villains of the story. So, let's talk about him. One, Kobayashi. That switch and sudden turn of events was not earned.
Wow. I bought it.
Earned. I was like,
I bought
what?
Well, because like from the very beginning, we're establishing that Kobayashi and Atari have some kind of relationship. Like from the very beginning, they mentioned that Kobayashi has adopted Atari after the train accident. And later when they find out that Atari is gone, like that's what it like kind of instigates Kobayashi to like start getting these feelings. But at least to me, like it's based partially out of the fact that Atari disappeared. So he's like, wait, my kid is doing this? And so, like, at this point, like, once Atari shows up all injured and whatnot, and gives, like, a very moving speech, even if we don't understand as the audience mostly. We have the translator, but, I imagine it would be more impactful in your native language. But, like, he gives a moving speech to the audience. And, like, a person who's taken you in from the very beginning, like, they have to be affected by that. So, at least to me, I buy the Kobayashi in that moment, changing heart. But, like, at the same time, the problem is that Kobayashi's motivations are also very cartoonish from the very beginning, so I never take his being hard on dogs that seriously. Because, like, from the very beginning, we established that the reason is that their dynasty was had a battle with dogs a long time ago, and so because since then they always have a grudge towards dogs. Like that's the entire motivation, that they just hate dogs. And like, to me, that's very cartoony. So if you start from that kind of way, I can buy a sudden twist more easily than if this was based on more logic than like in a live action drama, let's say.
But I mean, we don't even really, I don't know. There's no explanation about Major Domo. Like,
yeah, Major Domo, I agree, is a nothing character. Like, he's basically a Frankenstein.
Basically.
Is he a Major Domo, or is his name Major Domo?
It's like Major Space Domo is what is in Wikipedia.
Because like a Major Domo is a thing. It's like the head of a house. It's what he is. He's like a head of a household.
Yeah, so he's the head of the house.
But like, I wouldn't put it past them for his name to just be Major Domo.
Maybe he and Yoko Ono are friends.
Yeah.
You know.
But also, like, Major Domo, like, at the end he gets very angry at Kobayashi. Like, that makes no sense, because
it makes sense if, like, suddenly Kobayashi actually decides to be human for once and actually shows a change of heart, when every other moment he didn't show that. So I understand more Major Domo's frustration with Kobayashi than Kobayashi actually being sympathetic.
Yeah, no, I'm the complete opposite on this. Like, Major Domo's the one who's unbelievable here. Like, Kobayashi makes sense, but Major Domo, like, we haven't established that he's even a part of the Kobayashi family, have we? Like, he's just a steward there. Yeah. And does he have political power? Like, because they give the translator says something like he's angry that he went back on his campaign promises. What does he care? Unless he's like, it's like a prime minister situation, but the movie does nothing to explain that part of it. So, like, to me, Major Domo is like the weakest link in that whole scene.
They're both weak. Well, like, they're both just very weak. Yes, Ryan.
Okay, well, I mean, like, so I think that it came off to me as Major Domo is the one who's kind of manipulating things behind the scenes. And there was a moment where when Kobayashi is having his change of heart and his eyes kind of glow. Do you remember?
Yeah, I noticed that. I remember that.
Like, I was wondering if there's supposed to be, if there's like a supernatural element to this, you know.
Because Atari's eyes tend to glow at times, don't they?
I thought that was just like a visual thing.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was to represent his change of heart or you know, I wouldn't have been surprised if there was some sort. Major Domo seemed to be some sort of like the spirit of the beheaded head of the Kobayashi household. He'd come back to get his revenge or something, but it didn't really go that way. But
I don't know. I just if he was gonna be kind of the Rasputin figure of the Kobayashi clan, I would have preferred, again, some actual visual indicators of that.
Or hey, let's see a conversation between Major Domo and Kobayashi, maybe with subtitles.
But I don't think that I think that their position and it's less of it represents society. It's not like a singular antagonist character. It's more of this huge entity of the government, the man that they're fighting against. And I don't think that it was really intended for them to be that singular of a character and I think that we don't see really Kobayashi as a character until he has kind of a change of heart, and then he gives up a kidney and is really moved by Atari at the end. Is the only time kind of we see him as a character.
Yeah, I think this entire scene, like from his change of heart to the giving of the kidney, like all that is very strong to me.
Yeah. Like I don't think that, you know, the way they set up the opposition in this movie, it's very detached, and it's not supposed to be really focused on. It's more of the main conflict is more of the journey of finding spots and getting back on the island
I'd say like that's a bit of an issue calling it the focus is on the journey, because I do think that the second half like splits its focus between the spots and the government. Like I do think the movie puts a lot more focus on the government side of things in the second half. But if you're going to do that, you should do a little bit more work into like fleshing out motivations besides like what you've done at this point. So like I don't buy that side of it, the fact that this isn't supposed to be the focus. The movie definitely shifts focus to this by the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's keep going then. So Atari and Spots are gravely injured. Atari's only remaining kidney fails, but Kobayashi, admitting his mistakes, donates his own to save the boy. By election law, mayorship to the city falls to Atari, and he decrees that dogs be allowed to reintegrate into society. Tracy and Atari become a couple, and Chief reunites with Nutmeg and takes up the role of bodyguard for Atari. Spots, presumed dead, recovers from his injuries and secretly raises his children under the Kobayashi manor. So, one, did you wish just even a little bit that Spots had died? Just even a little bit?
I mean, that's almost the expected route, so the fact that they didn't go with that, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a decision. Well, like that would be the logical way to go, that they die, but this movie is not logical, at least to me, in a lot of ways. So it's like, okay, whatever. And they have a happy family. That's a feel good. Once again, going into this whole fairy tale tone, like this is the fairy tale ending.
I mean, down to the heterosexuality. Like, right down to it.
Yeah, although I will say this had no hints of hope. Like, when does a female character interact with another female character in this movie?
I mean, they don't.
See, so there's no room for even exploring that at all in this movie, just because they don't give the opportunities.
I don't mean like, oh, I demand homosexuality. I'm saying I don't need romance. Like, Tracy and Atari didn't have to be a thing. Like, they didn't have to be a thing. And Nutmeg and Chief didn't have to get together.
No, I will say, like, when they saw the trailer and we had I think I have a crush on you. I was like, are we going to do that too? We're going to have like a love thing in the middle. But to their credit, they barely touch on it. It's like that line, and then it doesn't really come into effect until like the very end when you see them together. But then you think like, well, why is Atari with her? Like, what does he care? So like that doesn't make sense. But at the very least, the movie decided not to focus on that at all. And like I appreciate it, because I am not interested in that at all.
I'm just saying they didn't have to put it in at all.
No,
I'm just saying, like, if you're not going to focus on it, then why put it in?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need gay everywhere. I'm just saying.
Why even have the "I have a crush on you" line? Like, in the end, does that really matter? Because her entire character is just pro dogs. So what does she care about the kid for? I mean, you can care about the kid like empathetically, but like the crush line just feels so out of place. Like, it's only serving the purpose of setting up the shot of them at the end together. But other than that, in the middle, it means nothing. So why even have it?
And also, like, they didn't explore at all that she was Nutmeg's owner. Like, that makes more sense to explore. Like, that is what drives her forward, is that she wants her dog back. Versus the whole, like, I have a crush on you, Atari. Now I must learn everything about you. So it's just this kind of, I don't know. I don't know. That was just a thing that made my eyes roll. But, another question. This is like legit a bullet point in my outline. All caps. Where are the cats?
This society seems to
entire movie.
Like,
like you have
instead of going to cats, they go to robot dogs. Hey.
And not just that. Well, I mean, you could make the argument that cats won't fight dogs. Like, they're too lazy for that. They're just be like, I'm not fighting a dog. Like, they won't let humans control them. But, cause that's just how cats are. But, no, I just think like, you had like Kobayashi, like with the cat tattoo, you had him occasionally petting a cat. I'm just saying, like, dogs and cats, that is a thing that's always, like, why are Kobayashi so cat driven? Or give me a cat doing something and maybe I can understand, but I don't know. I just thought it was a wasted opportunity, especially since we're not going to get an aisle of cats. Like, I just wanted some sort of cat representation
We're not at the sequel just yet. You gotta hold on.
All right.
We gotta get to the peninsula of cats.
Of course. But yeah, so, Ryan, what do you think of this kind of wrap up to this story?
Was it supposed to be implied that, that Spots and, oh god, I can't remember the name of his romantic partner.
The one that's skinny.
Yeah, that one. They were supposed to be living like in secret.
No, that was not implied. This is just purely from Wikipedia. Okay. Don't trust it, guys. Don't trust it.
Yeah. But no. I mean, I appreciated that it went the route where I appreciated him living like, because I fully expected him to. It's typically where you go with the heroic sacrifice, and then he gets the memorial and that, and the other Chief and Nutmeg and Tracy and Atari. It doesn't take up like an inordinate amount of. Does it need to be there? No, but I appreciate that it wasn't. It wasn't that big of a role, and it didn't really overwhelm kind of the story. Like that wasn't her driving. I never felt that. Yeah, like Tracy's driving motivation was, I've got this crush on Atari. It was just that was just an added thing to it. But overall, I was satisfied with the ending.
Cool. All right. Well, we're at that point where we're going to do our closing thoughts. Any last thing you want to add about this movie, Alex?
Okay.
Hey!
Yeah. Yeah, whistling was very frequent in this movie. I appreciate that touch. I think in the end, like, I know we've sounded pretty negative at times at this movie. I think the issue is that, well, one thing that we've been hammering home, it's a fairy tale style story. With a fairy tale story, it's all very simplistic. As a result, if you try to dig deeper, you're going to run into issues. In this case, very problematic issues. But if you're going in thinking it's just enjoying the fairy tale, like just letting the feelings come over you, like it works. It's a satisfying experience. You get your couple of laughs. The emotional moments, for the most part, work. Like it's all, and it's pretty, just like a children's book. Like it's very, you can't take your eyes off the screen when it's on there. So like if on a superficial level, it's a very good, almost great movie. The problem is when you dig into like the implications of what the certain details, choosing to make those important and choosing to make other details not important. Like if you dig more into the decisions that were made in the process of making this movie, that's where you start getting into issues of like, well, is this art in the end doing good for society? Like to the point where like, are you making people laugh at the wrong things? Are you making people enjoy things that are in the process marginalizing other communities? So like those are things that you have to take into account and things that you have to balance when you're watching something like this. I think in the end, I really enjoyed it. I would probably watch it again. Like it's a very fun movie to watch for sure. But you have to also take into account like what effect is this going to have, or like with people that I'm watching it, like to try to make them aware of like certain things that are going on if maybe they don't notice. and like just to try to have a balanced discussion about it. Because I do think that all of this talk about cultural appropriation, it's a good opportunity to open people up to other cultures, things that they just aren't used to thinking about because it's not really presented in this way. Like in a children's film like this, and it's PG-13, but let's face it, people are going to bring children to the movie. Like this may be their first like real interaction with this kind of culture. So you have to like take that opportunity to discuss with them these things, talk about things that maybe are okay, things that aren't okay, and you use that to better yourself and better other people. But at the same time, enjoy what's going on in front of you. So like it's a balance for sure. And I think that in the end, if you can't get past that, that's totally understandable because there are big issues with this. But at the same time, I do think that there is room for both enjoying this movie and using it as an opportunity to spread the message about recognizing other cultures in a more appropriate way than this movie manages to do.
Gotcha. And what about you, Ryan? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. So I think that this movie, you know, it plays a lot with heavily on the iconography and the aesthetic of Japan without delving too deeply and perhaps not paying the proper reverence to, you know, where that iconography and where those aesthetics come from. And it has a problem with appropriation. But it never felt to me that it was at the direct expense of that material. That it was you know, that it was making fun of it. Does that make sense? And that if you're a fan of, you know, Wes Anderson in general, and more so if you're a fan of just animation and filmmaking, I think that you know, the craft of this film is incredible. I mean, the way, like the set design, the costume design in this, and the how masterful the blocking is worth it, if only for that. And the story that it tells is simple and satisfying. One piece of the costume design that, I mean, is little, but it stood out to me, that I really enjoyed is, Yoko Ono has, her hair, hair clips or her hair scrunchies. They have, it's the scientist character. She has the, deuterium and oxygen, spell out YO, on her, in her pigtails or in her, and I don't know, and the periodic table elements, is what she used for her hair ties. And I love that. And I really think that Wes Anderson belongs in animation, and I hope he continues to work in animation.
Cool. I have no doubt that he's going to keep going with animation. I think the only sad thing is that stop motion, which is his his selected method of animation, just takes that long.
Yeah.
But it just takes a long time. But I have no doubts that this will be the last animated film by him that we see. Or is it the other way? I don't know. You know what I mean, people. But yeah, I said my piece. I don't hate this movie. Usually, in a weird way, I'm my most negative about movies that I enjoy, but think that could have taken a next step and been that were good, but could have been amazing. But yeah, I had fun with this movie, even though I had to look away at times because of certain things. But yeah, so you can find out all the info on this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can join us on Discord to text chat about animation at overlyanimated.com/Discord. Support us via Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to all our current patrons, especially our patron of the podcast, Sagittores. And thanks, as always, to our Patreon executive producers, John, Ryan, Steve, Alex, Andy, and Hugh. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye!
Isle of Dogs. So many dogs.